What is the best self-driving car?
That is a question we are breaking down and looking at in this video. We have 10 cars from 10 manufacturers and a series of tests to put them all through with the help of safety experts Thatcham Research. Keep watching until the end to see exactly how good or bad current self-driving systems are and get the full rundown of our results. Before we get stuck into all that, if you want a great deal on your next car, go to whatcar.com, and to see lots more new car reviews and features, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Let's explain what we mean by self-driving. And the first thing to point out is that no mainstream car on the road today is actually capable of driving itself for an entire journey, start to finish. When people talk about self-driving tech, it is usually a reference to driving assistance features. This is primarily adaptive cruise control, which adjusts a car's speed to keep it a fixed distance away from the vehicle in front of it, and steering assistance, which keeps the car in the center of its lane without you having to make any big physical inputs into the steering. Those are the driving assistance features we're putting under the spotlight in this test. And just to be clear, people might think these systems are self-driving, but they are not. Even when they're active, whatever the car does is still always the responsibility of the driver. Anyway, for this test we have a mix of cars across all price ranges from almost every manufacturer. Mercedes told us it didn't have a car available for the day of our testing. Make of that what you will. While Volvo declined to provide a car and said that it doesn't permit testing of its active safety systems for comparative purposes. That's perhaps a surprise given the Swedish brand's long-standing association with safety. The Volvo we have here is a privately owned XC60.
Okay, so we're going to start with the S-bend test. So what we have here is a simulated section of motorway with 3 lanes. We're going to stay in the middle lane. We're going to use adaptive cruise control and steering assistance in each car, and we're going to see what it's like navigating us through this very simple section of curves. We're going to do this at 3 different speeds, 50 miles an hour, 62 miles an hour, and 75 miles an hour. And we're going to start with a car that does this very well. It's the Tesla Model Y. And here we go at 50 miles an hour now. We go left. We then gently go right. No problems at all. Okay, now at 62 miles an hour, let's see what this is like. Very gently to the left. Very smoothly to the right. Very good again. Okay, so now final run, 75 miles an hour around the S-bend. Here we go, fairly smooth again. So, very impressive overall. Now let's show you this test in a car that doesn't cope quite so well. So now we're in the Toyota Yaris. We're going at 50 miles an hour, adaptive cruise control on, steering assistance on, and here comes the S-bend. So, now we're sort of going right. We've gone over the lane quite a bit there, and now we're veering off into the central lane, and it's that because it's turned off the steering assistance. Even at the slowest speed there, that was quite a struggle in the Yaris. Didn't feel particularly confident at any point of that. Okay, so 62 miles an hour in the Yaris. Here comes the bend. We're going left. It felt like it was turning a little late, and we're just not bothering to turn, and it's cancelled the steering assistance, and away we go into a bollard there. Okay, so final run at 75. Let's see if we can actually get to 75 first. And we're just going straight off into the bollards again.
The Model Y was the most competent performer of all 10 cars, responding the most quickly to the curving lane markings and maintaining an accurate central position at 50 miles an hour. And it was only at the 2 higher speeds where it started to drift slightly wide towards the lane markings. The Audi RS Q8, Kia EV6 and Nissan Qashqai were also successful at all 3 speeds. The BMW iX3, Ford Kuga, VW ID5 and XC60 passed through the S-bend at speeds of up to 62 miles an hour, but at 75 miles an hour, these cars could only manage to complete the first corner of the S-bend before running out of the lane on the second curve, with the steering assist cancelling itself altogether. The Range Rover Sport could only complete the test at 50 miles an hour, but it still finished above the Yaris, which could only successfully negotiate the first corner even at the lowest speed.
So what we have next is the pothole test. The idea is we've got adaptive cruise control on, we've got steering assistance on, but in our lane ahead of us we can see an obstacle. And what we want to do is manually steer the car around the obstacle while seeing how all the other systems that are active cope with that. So I can see the obstacle, I want to steer around it, which I can do very simply, and then all the systems are still active and the car brings me back very gently into the center of the lane once we're around the obstacle. So in the EV6, that is a very, very smooth process.
In this test, the ideal scenario, as shown by the EV6, is to have the car's systems remaining active while allowing the driver to gently input some steering to help avoid an obstacle. The EV6 was the smoothest car here in this test, and pretty much everything else also managed it with little fuss. There was one exception though.
The Model Y is very different from all the other cars on the pothole test, and I'm going to show you why. So, here we go, everything turned on at 45 miles an hour. I'm going down this lane minding my own business. I can see a pothole there. I want to adjust the steering. I'm going to turn the wheel, and then suddenly it completely cancels the steering assistance and hands all control back to the driver, although the adaptive cruise control does carry on. So whereas the other systems give you a kind of blend between letting the technology do its thing and then also letting the driver have some kind of involvement with the steering, in the Model Y, as soon as it senses that the driver wants to do something different from the lane keep assistance, then it just turns everything off and says, okay, there you go.
This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some will appreciate the fact that there's a clear line between who's in control of the Model Y's steering, you or the car. It's never a collaborative effort. However, some others might find this all or nothing nature disconcerting. Next up, the emergency stop test demonstrates how the systems cope when the car detects a stationary vehicle ahead at the very last moment. Each car follows another moving vehicle on a straight road with the adaptive cruise control set to 30 miles an hour. The leading vehicle then moves across to the next lane to suddenly reveal a dummy stationary car, requiring our test car's systems to perform an emergency stop. This test is also repeated at a higher speed of 42 miles an hour. And the good news is that at 30 miles an hour, all but one of our cars managed to come to a halt in time to avoid a collision. The ID.5 is the only one that didn't, although its automatic braking system had started to reduce speed and therefore the severity of the impact. When the speed was cranked up to 42 miles an hour, the Model Y was the only car that stopped in time to avoid striking the stationary vehicle. Even though most of the other cars identified the hazard and automatically applied the brakes, none slowed enough to avoid contact. They struck the stationary vehicle with enough force to damage both vehicles. There were two cars, however, that at 42 miles an hour failed to react to the stationary vehicle ahead at all. Both the Range Rover Sport and the XC60 struck the vehicle without slowing. 42 miles an hour was the maximum speed this test was carried out at, so we don't know if the Model Y would still stop at faster speeds. Still, for every other car, this is a fairly shocking set of results, because in the real world, you're most likely to be using these driving assistance features on the motorway, where the speeds you'll be travelling for the vast majority of the time will be far quicker than 42 miles an hour. And the final point to make is that this is all just a safety backup, and a fully engaged and responsible driver should, in this scenario up to 42 miles an hour, be able to anticipate what's going on and brake with enough time to prevent a collision.
For our next test, we're going to see what happens if you turn on adaptive cruise control and steering assistance, but then take your hands off the wheel and keep them off the wheel. Now in the UK, you're not allowed to do that. You have to have your hands on the wheel at all times, even if the car is steering for you. But what we're going to do is start the clock and then see what happens going along at 24 miles an hour with our hands off the wheel in the Model Y. But now it's giving me a sign to apply slight turning force to steering wheel. We've got some blue flashing lights to try and get my attention. now. We've got an audible beep, we've got a red light. The system's getting quite annoyed at us now. The blue flashing is becoming more intense. Now, big red sign and the car's slowing down there and the hazards are on and it's brought us to a smooth stop, which all seems very calm and basically what you'd want to happen in that situation. Now let's show you what happens in the EV6. So we've got cruise control and steering assistance on. At 20 miles an hour, my hands are off the wheel and away we go. But now we've got something turn up on the driver display saying keep hands on steering wheel. We've got a flashing icon with a beep now, so it's getting a bit more annoyed at me. And here comes the S-bend, but now lane following assist cancelled. So you can see we're at this S-bend now, adaptive cruise control is still going, but it's just cancelled the steering assistance. So now we've just veered off out of our lane and there's no sign of the car slowing down. It's not going to cancel its cruise control system. It just completely shuts off the steering assistance, which is terrible because if you're going at 70 miles an hour, then it will still keep you going at 70 miles an hour, but just turn off the steering assistance. So if you genuinely are incapacitated at the wheel, then you're pretty done for in that situation because you have to physically take back control of the steering. Otherwise, you're just going to veer off and have a massive accident.
The Yaris and XC60 react in a similar way to the EV6, cancelling their steering assistance and leaving the vehicle to continue driving without human supervision. The XC60 slows down to a constant 7 miles an hour, but the other two continue at whatever speed you've programmed into the adaptive cruise control. The Range Rover Sport promptly slows itself down if warnings are ignored, but once it has started its emergency stop procedure, it responds very hesitantly when you try to override the system, even if you floor the accelerator pedal. This leaves you vulnerable to traffic approaching from behind. The systems in the iX3, ID5, Model Y and Qashqai bring each car to a controlled stop within 1 minute of their driver taking their hands off the wheel. The iX3 is the quickest to apply the brakes, while the Model Y takes the longest. In addition to the initial warnings, the RSQ8 tightens the driver's seatbelt while it slows down. The ID5 also sharply tugs at the driver's seatbelt to alert them and sounds the horn several times when the car is close to stopping. Rather than stopping, the Cougar slows down to 5 miles an hour and the steering assist system remains active. The theory being that this makes it easier for the driver to take over if they come around. Should that not happen, a 5 mile an hour impact will be less severe than it would be at a higher speed. The final thing to consider for this test is how easy these systems are to use, which will affect how likely the driver is to use them. The Model Y's systems deserve praise for being particularly simple. You just flick the gear selector stalk down once to activate the adaptive cruise and then again for lane keeping. From that point, adjusting the speed and distance from the vehicle ahead of you is a case of simply rotating or nudging the control dial on the steering wheel. The RSQ8 system is also easy to operate with a separate stalk mounted on the steering column. Most of the remaining cars here have simple physical buttons on the steering wheel to operate the systems. But the ID5's touch-sensitive controls are extremely difficult to press accurately, leaving the driver unclear as to whether they've activated the desired function. Each of these cars were awarded a mark out of 5 in each of the areas we tested, and the result left the Yaris rock bottom. But it's worth noting that it is by far the least expensive car here, so it isn't fair to assume it should be fitted with the same latest safety technology that a £100,000 Audi gets. Next up, the XC60. A disappointingly low finish given Volvo's reputation for safety, but some of the brand's newer models, like the XC40, have slightly more advanced active safety systems than this test car. We look forward to testing those in the future. The Range Rover Sport is next, and really this is a disappointingly low finish for this luxury SUV. But its failures on the S-bend test and its odd reactions with your hands off the wheel mean there are better self-driving systems out there. The ID5 finishes higher, but it's still not brilliant, with frustrating steering wheel controls and mediocre performance on the S-bend test. The Cougar controls are much better than the ID5's because they are physical buttons which are easy to hit. It finishes 1 place higher. The EV6 is perhaps the strangest contender here because it scored maximum marks in the S-bend test, pothole test, and for its ease of use, but it loses a lot of marks because of the pretty dangerous fact that it cancels the steering assistance but keeps the car going at speed if you keep your hands off the wheel. The solid Qashqai finished 4th, which is a very impressive result for a car that is significantly cheaper than our top 3. The BMW iX3 is 3rd, and despite not totally acing the S-bend, was very good in all other areas. The Audi RS Q8 was an even more impressive performer though, with a very good suite of smooth and confidence-inspiring driving assistance technology. It was very close, but the best driving assistance system around is the one you'll find in the Tesla Model Y. It might not be a surprise result for some given Tesla's reputation, but it's great to be able to see that Tesla's driving assistance features aren't just made up of a load of marketing guff. There's seriously impressive technology and engineering backing it all up. The only area it lost marks was the pothole test, and some people may argue that it's actually a better thing that it hands over control straight away. And by the way, all the technology we tested in the Model Y is exactly the same as you'll find in a Model 3 as well. So there you have it. There's a long way to go before fully self-driving cars will take to the roads, but there's a lot of impressive choice around today when it comes to driving assistance systems. Thanks for watching. For more information, go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great deal on your next car. But before you go, subscribe to our channel.